It is wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
My pleasure.
So let's begin our journey with this. 5 years ago, the pandemic changed so much for all of us. It's a question that I've wanted to put away, but it did so much to us. So how did you survive the pandemic of 2020, and how has it influenced your writing and the way that you do things now in 2025?
I did not, I know a lot of people had a terrible time through the pandemic, and I was lucky that I did not have young children that I had to deal with at home and trying to work as well. I did not have an elderly parent in a nursing home. So it did not affect me that way. I would say professionally that I was teaching at the time. So what I needed to do was up my game as far as technology was concerned and move everything that I did in a classroom onto an IT platform. And this was, I taught English. So this was everything from lecturing to putting people in groups and having them do projects and being able to mark their work online. So that's how it was professionally. Personally, I have two kids in their 30s. They were in their early 30s at the time. And at the beginning, I mean, that happened in March. It was all kind of new and interesting. So for Easter, I made a great big Easter dinner and I went and delivered it to each of them at their places. And we stood 6 feet apart and did all that stuff. And then got on Zoom and we all ate the same meal and had a virtual table that we were all eating at. So that was all fine for that time. But then when it came to Mother's Day, Father's Day, a couple of birthdays over the summer, Thanksgiving, Christmas, I was having none of it. They were required to be here in person. There was a lot of talk then, millennials don't kill your boomer parents. And I just said, I'm your boomer parent. I require you here. I will take the risk. So that's, did not affect me in that way. I was surprised the world shut down and I wasn't going to. But it is an interesting thing. And I'm curious about you a little bit. This is all obviously a question that's very important to you.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about what it did in your life.
I have a son who's on the spectrum, and at the time he was, what was this, like 5 years ago now, so he was just in early high school, and I have a stepdaughter too, and she's like 13 going on 30. So,
Yeah.
he loved baseball and school, and when all of it shut down, I didn't know what I was going to do. Like, it was a big moment, but I work IT by day. So I also have a jazz radio show. I wasn't really as much into the famous interviews component. So I had to make a decision. How am I going to do this? And I just ramped up all of my interviews with musicians and did more. I would play it on speaker for the kids. They would be with me in the car. We drove around. We saw
Mm,
things. I did not want to diminish or slow down my life. I knew it had a
right.
monopoly on us. And I
Mm,
think the thing that's so interesting why I keep doing this, I've tried to say I don't want to ask this question, but everybody loves it so much. But for me, I find it in our lifetimes to be, I mean, we had 9/11. There was some other things that happened that were momentous, but this was a global, all-encompassing thing that put us square in an existential fork in the road that said,
mm,
who are you? What are you going to do? And how do you want to do this? And for people like us that are over that 40 or 50 mark, it was really half your time's gone. What are you going to do? Like, it
mm.
was really a moment for us to reckon and to figure it out. So I think it's still seminal, and I think it's going to be like that for a while because it did change the trajectory of so many things, you know, in our lives. And I wish in America it would have changed our trajectory to avoid the disaster that's happening right now, but unfortunately it didn't.
Hmm. Interesting.
So
Hmm.
anyway, that's kind of the reason why I've stuck on it. I don't know, maybe there's something in my brain that because 9/11 was a big deal too, but I was in Europe at the time. I was in the back of a water taxi in Venice, Italy. So I had to fight my way back to America. My flight from Paris to Kansas City didn't exist. There was just all of these variables. So maybe somewhere in my brain, a global trauma has just triggered this fascination as to what other people did and how they got
Hmm.
through it. And I'm always surprised at how overwhelmingly positive people are about that time. Doesn't take away from the woe and
Yeah.
the things that were happening, but what people did on an individual level, it was definitely the glass half full.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny. It reminds me of a question I asked my grandmother years ago. She was born in 1906. And I said, "Man, you lived through such interesting times. You know, they had their influenza, First World War. And then not only did they have a First World War, but they had an influenza in a First World War. And then just a very few years later, they had a Second World War, all encompassing all the sorts of things you're talking about." And her answer was, "Oh, heavens, I didn't think about that. I was raising children."
Yeah.
So, you know, we all have our lanes in life, and different things affect different people differently.
Yeah, they certainly do. I
Yeah,
remember interviewing a musician that had family that remembered way back, family way back when the Spanish flu happened, how there would be a piece of cloth on the front door that would be signifying "do not come near." And there was
yeah,
just little telltale signs of warning people. And I mean, it would just take whole households out. I mean, it was just, I think sometimes we get so wrapped up into the creature comforts of this modern living that we're in that we lose sight of the fact of the way that people lived just even 50 or 60 years ago that didn't have all these technological advents and these things that affected our lives medically and socially and all of those things. So
yeah.
or maybe we just have short-term memories.
Well, even if you think of a couple of hundred years ago, we live better now than aristocrats did back then.
Yeah,
You know, we have much more comfortable lives, even at the lower end of the socioeconomic level.
true.
They are more comfortable lives. I mean, my father's generation in England, they didn't have indoor plumbing. You know, and we have air conditioning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Even like with medicine, just the way
Mm-hmm.
anesthesia and the way that they would do things. I mean, there was a very noted band leader in Kansas City named Benny Moten, and he was getting his tonsils taken out at 39 and died on the table.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
like an up and coming big guy that was going to take over the world of jazz. And it was just, I think he was doing it kind of for vanity too. I think he wanted to change the trajectory of his pitch or something like that. And it just
Uh-huh.
backfired.
And I read a story about your President Adams' daughter, who had a mastectomy without anesthetic. They gave her, a few swigs of scotch
Yep.
and then cut her breast off. Like, can you imagine?
I've heard
So,
stories like that.
yeah, yeah,
Just a whiskey soaked rag in your mouth and you just go for it. It's insane.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We're very lucky.
Yeah, it's definitely a privileged time. So let me ask you this.
Mhm.
It's very clear from, you're a writer and a teacher, but if I put you in front of 12-year-olds for you to explain to a younger audience exactly what you do on a daily basis and it's career day, how would you explain it to the kids?
Well, I would tell them I would look very boring because I just sit at a table at a desk and I type things. So,
Yeah.
and it's even different now because one thing that is a bit of a surprise to me about being a writer is how much time you need to be spending on promotion. So I'm starting a whole new career in figuring out marketing. I would like to sit and be boring at a table and do my writing, but there's an awful lot more that I need to do as far as speaking engagements, going to festivals, doing podcasts, doing all of these other things, because a writer's greatest enemy is obscurity.
Yeah.
So you need to have people who know about your work and are interested in it. And I'm quite confident if I can get somebody to my books, they're going to enjoy themselves. But it's quite a big task to get somebody to the books. So I would say it seems I'm a writer, but I'm a marketer more often than I'm a writer these days. But the whole idea is to write stories. I mean, that's what fuels a writer, is to uh, wrestle with the word on the page and come up with a story that actually lifts off the page and involves you as a reader.
So how did you fall in love with words and stories? What was the first book or story you read growing up that opened that curtain?
Well, I was always, I loved school and I loved reading and I loved writing. I was the student that school was made for. I know a lot of people say something very different, but I just loved it. The idea of going to a place every day where you can learn stuff you didn't know before and live in an intellectual world. I mean, that's my idea of heaven. So I always loved books. And the first ones that I can actually remember that I would wait outside for the bookmobile to come so that I could get the next one in the series was Enid Blyton's adventure series. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but the
Yeah.
Castle of Adventure, the Valley of Adventure, the Mountain of Adventure, and a lot of what I write now has to do with adventure. And I suspect there were seeds sown then. But I didn't come to being a writer in a straightforward way. That, I know a lot of writers say, I knew when I was 5 I wanted to be a writer. Well, it did not occur to me for many, many years. It might be that in Canada we didn't have a lot of homegrown writers. It's part of the issue of being in the shadow of giants for most of our history. First it was England, now it's the States. So you think of writers as coming from other places. But I always loved reading and writing. And when I came to make the decision to be a writer, it was after I had been through I'd gone down other paths and come up with this idea. I don't know if you want to hear that story, but I'll let
Sure.
you.
Yeah.
Uh, well, I was always committed to going to school. And even I had turbulence in my adolescence, but still was very committed to going to school. So I kept going. And I did my undergrad in psychology at the University of Guelph. And I was one of those young feminists in the 1970s running around setting up rape crisis centers and shelters um, for victims of domestic violence. And I was one of a group of women who set up a university club that we called Women in Crisis. And we set up a rape crisis center. And I was the first director. And it was my job to set up the shelter, which moved off campus and is still going today. Once I finished that, I decided I had looked at victims for a while. Now I wanted to go look at perpetrators. So I became a prison guard at a correctional center where they had a maximum security wing housing inmates who had been convicted of sexual assault or arson or had mental and emotional problems. And I did that for 13 months and then went on and did my MA in criminology. And I did my thesis in looking at domestic violence. So I was always pursuing something that fascinated me. So I graduated from that. I got my dream job as director of a social service agency, and I hated it. I discovered that I do not like managing people. When it's your job to make sure that other people do their jobs, it's like you're being their mummy, and they are not cute enough to warrant a mummy. So I really had to sit down at that point and make a decision. What could I do that will be deeply meaningful to me and will be worth all the energy that I'm willing to put into something? And so that's when I decided that I wanted to be a writer. But then a whole new host of problems start, because now you have to figure out how to make some money by it. And I started by writing romance because that's what was selling at the time. I had never read one before, but now I gobbled them up and studied them, and that eventually led to Harlequin super romance. That's a whole story. And I decided I'd better go back to school in English because I had been in psychology. And if you try to write a novel the way you write a psychology essay, it's going to be terrible because you're going to know who done it right with the thesis statement at the start. So I wanted to know about my discipline. I wanted to know the history of it. So I went back to school, did another MA, this one in English, caught fire academically. I do have my enthusiasms, and went on to do a PhD in English. And so I have a career of teaching English, and my thesis focused on Canadian women writers during the years 1965 to 1980, which I called the identity years. That's a whole other story too. And I decided I would have babies. So I had my 2 boys during the years that I was going to graduate school, which is, if you ever want to make someone very uncomfortable in their lives, suggest they do that. And the two of the biggest projects, my kids and my PhD, ended around the same time. And they mercifully went off to university, and I've defended my thesis. And so now I was teaching, but I had time to get back into writing. My Harlequin had been published by that time. And I decided, well, I had these 2 huge projects on my shoulders for so long that I really felt like being free. So I felt like galloping across the prairies with the wind through my hair, just, having that kind of a feeling. So I decided to start researching the Jesse James gang, because they got to ride horses and they could do whatever they wanted. And that was the seed that started me researching wider and coming up with the story for my first historical novel called This Godforsaken Place, and went on from there. So I didn't come at it directly. I had already always had reading and writing. The seeds were there, the fertilizer was there. But I am also fascinated with many things in life. And I think that is all good because you can use that as a writer.
So, are you in shock with the way the world has, especially in America, revoked the rights of women? All of the progress that was made, we've gone to a level of dark ages right now. Healthcare access has been limited. There's all these decisions that are being made by somebody that clearly doesn't hold women in high esteem. Is this kind of shocking based on your studies and what you write about and what you do?
Well, I mean, I'm a Canadian. I don't like talking about American business because it's
Yeah,
Americans' business. And
yeah,
it's very different in Canada from the way it is in the States, just the way the law is. Um, we had the history of a doctor named Henry Morgentaler in these years, 1965 to 1980. And he basically brought the nation to its knees over abortion law. He challenged the criminal code that made abortion illegal. And it resulted in a Supreme Court decision knocking down the abortion law so that Canada is the only Western country that does not have an abortion law. And there's no appetite in this country to open that back up. Now, so no one's worried about that in Canada because the criminal code is the law for the land,
yeah,
coast to coast to coast. But the fights go on about how much a provincial healthcare system would pay toward abortion. And there's been lots of sort of fracasing about that, but no one's worried about it being illegal. So that seems to be where it's different in the States.
yeah,
And my understanding is that the Dobbs decision kicked the decision back to the States. So it's just different people making those decisions.
yeah,
So my understanding, of course, is that it's nobody else's business. You know, the state has not been involved in abortion for a very long time historically. It was only in 1803 that the Ellenborough Act in Britain decided to have the state take over abortion as an issue that it controlled. Before that, and 1803 is not very long ago,
yeah,
and before that, it was never anything that had to do with the law. It
yeah,
was the church took care of it. It was ecclesiastical law that would take care of it.
yeah,
So the players involved are very recent. The state decided to take over, then the doctors took over. And the doctors, as the medical profession was invented and became stronger, the doctors decided that they would try to wrest control from the state. And it would be up to a doctor to decide whether a woman should get an abortion or not. Abortion has always happened. There's never been a time when women didn't have abortions. So it's just the issue is who decides whether she can decide. But when the doctors started getting more powerful, it was their decision as to necessity. Necessity started physically and then went to mentally. And in recent years, the women's movement has gone onto the stage. So these are the three players: the church, the state, and the women's movement, and they fight all of this out. And the doctors. And the doctors have been losing ground as the state has become more assertive about it wanting jurisdiction. The doctors, necessity was knocked down as a defense.
hmm,
And so the doctors don't get to decide anymore. The state is now making its pitch to. So historically, it has a big story
yeah,
behind it.
sure, yeah, yeah,
Now,
I get it.
another thing about that though is it's not as if this is like it's 1968 again.
Right,
So there's a genie here that really it's not going to be put back in a bag
yeah,
because one thing that Henry Morgentaler did in Canada, he invented the vacuum aspirator as he didn't invent it, but he refined it so that it could be used without it being an actual operation like a DNC would have been before that. So now you've got this fairly easy procedure to perform, and a doctor doesn't need to do it. So you could have a whole host of women learning how to do this and circumventing any law that tried. They always circumvented whatever law because people always had abortions, but women just had a bigger risk in having abortions before it became safer. And then, of course, there's the abortion pill and everything that did not exist back then. So it's not as if we're back in 1968 and it's as dangerous as it was. From what I understand, most of the states, abortion is still legal. And this is being fought out by the state in
Yeah.
various other states. So it's a smaller story than it once was.
Yeah.
And there are lots of other rights women have that they didn't have before the 60s and they still do now. I mean, in the 60s, women were the minority in going to post-secondary education. Now they're the majority. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot has changed for women. So I don't think that this is, it's one thing to make soapbox stands. It's another thing to actually enforce something. And I think it would be much harder to enforce than it would have been in Canada back in the 60s, that's for sure.
Hmm. So, who's been that inspirational force for you in your career of teaching and writing?
I don't get inspired by individual people so much as I get swept up in like I go through eras of reading books.
Hmm.
It's not one person who has had a big I have writers I admire, but when I was trying to write a romance, I was reading tons of romances. When I had babies, I was reading tons of baby books. I was always going to school. So I always had reading lists of things at school. When you do your PhD, you have to read hundreds of books. So I was always reading, but I was always following my interests in that rather than following particularly an individual. When I was in high school, I read a lot of D.H. Lawrence because that was what everybody was doing at the time. And I still read that way. Now I'm reading how to market your books.
Yeah. So, let me ask you this. What is the inspiration for you every day to get up to do this work? I mean, writing is it's a daily activity, also marketing and
Yeah.
everything to get it out. What is that motivation for you every day to do that, which is your business, and to also take care of your soul?
Well, first of all, I'm really glad that I don't have to make a living by it because that would make it miserable. So I'm quite happy to have written books. Now I'm marketing them. I'm marketing them because I want people to read them. But as far as motivation, I have never known a day in my life that I haven't been motivated by something. Life is fascinating. So, when you think about the chances of you or me being born, all of those eggs, all of those sperm, and you and I ended up being the combination. What a lucky thing it is that we get to exist on this planet. And at this time of history, I'm really glad I didn't live 2 million years ago or 200,000 years ago or even 200 years ago. I'm really glad I'm living now, especially being female and what kind of autonomy we have now that we didn't have back then. So I think of my body and my brain as being a rental. And I was lucky enough to get it. And I want to use every last drop of it before I die. And perhaps because the world is such an interesting place and I am so thrilled to be able to experience it, I've never had a problem with motivation.
So, as we said before, writing is one of those more solitary acts that's not action packed like other things might be as a spectator sport. But if you could be in the room or spend some time with someone that's either alive or not, a ghost or real, that was a writer, and you could see their process of how they constructed and went through the kind of ritual of writing their stuff, who would that be?
That would be Margaret Lawrence.
Yeah.
She was one of the women that I studied for my PhD, and I really admire her writing, and I admire how big and bold her characters are. And I would very much like to sit down and have a conversation with her about how she came up with Hagar Shipley, who was from her novel The Stone Angel, and she's just a once you meet her in her story, she just never leaves your psyche again.
So if you could run into that much younger version of you, say 18 years old, you walk out that door after the interview and some fantastical realm of mysticism you run into that young version of you, and you could give her a piece of advice based on where you've come, the wisdom you've accumulated over this road, what advice would you impart on that young version of you?
I wouldn't say anything. And that's not because I didn't make mistakes or go down wrong roads or whatever. But I've really come to understand that we come to who we are organically. And if you were to go back and tinker with the decisions you made or the things that you tried doing or the people you met, that you would interfere with that process. So, and I think that's part of taking responsibility for the decisions you did make. You suffer for your mistakes, and sometimes the suffering is really good. Those were good mistakes to make, and the suffering was really important because it ended up leading you to make much better decisions that you're enjoying now. So, if you had skipped over, that learning curve, what you have now wouldn't be as solid. So I would just close the door and leave and let her go on doing what she was doing.
So, in your books, what has been one of your favorite fan letters or favorite reviews that you've gotten?
Well, I had an email from someone who said that it was just a heart-stopping enjoyment of the action of the book, and thanks for the entertainment. And I really like it when people are good readers and they can see insightfully what it is you're trying to do. Because I think being a good reader is something that's becoming more and more challenging as people read less. And what they read. I was always told as a teacher, your students have only an 8-second attention span. Keep changing things up because they're not going to be able to follow what you're talking about. If that is the case, I mean, my kids follow just fine. So I don't know how much of that is them not being expected to, and how much that is that they really can't. But being a good reader is what writers depend on. So I am always very happy when I see someone give a review and have some kind of insight to what I was about, and kind of got a kick out of the same things I get a kick out of, and recognize the humor in it or the point of it.
So, at the end of the day, everyone out there has a perception of you: family, friends, fans, everyone that you teach, colleagues, everyone around you, different circles, but you run the proverbial show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I have had many conversations about this with my husband, and I absolutely have no idea.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't see how you could, because when people have a perception of you, they are inevitably distilling down all of the characteristics and actions and words and everything that they've heard you say, and that has to be almost by definition a subset, because they only see you once in a while, or they see you in certain circumstances. But as a person, you live all of it, and you know all of the details, and you know all of the nuances and the onion layers and the everything else. So I would be incapable of distilling that down to being one perception, because I live all of them. But
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If anyone wants to pick up your books, they want to reach out, they want to learn more, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place to go?
my website, cindagault.com,
Okay.
has my books there, and you can learn lots more about me and my work. And then there's also Facebook. If you Google Cinda Gault, you will find all kinds of stuff.
Okay. Cinda, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck. I
Thank,
appreciate it.
thank you too, Joe.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.